Okay, so Anne is in charge of business development and community engagement at Access Navigators. And Access Navigators, from the website, I love your I guess, subtitle, taking the mystery out of community engagement. And a goal of Access Navigators is to inspire a spirit of inclusiveness and influence communities to do the same. And it just sounds like a perfect fit for the Human Rights Commission of the town of Durham. So in our email exchange, you said you have a collaboration with UNH at this point, and you were just going to share some things you're doing with other communities, I guess. And so we're all ears. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Can we
I think this is my first Human Rights Commission meeting, but it's a pretty good fit. It's kind of all about the whole DEI and inclusiveness and making your community more welcoming, and I think that just fits what you're doing totally.
And can we just jump in? Our town administrator, Todd Sutton.
I just wanted to note that in the audience we have Rich Rain, our Public Works Director, and Audrey Klein, our Building Code Officer, and we thought that your feedback would really be helpful for our whole team here. So we're really looking forward to what you have to say.
Yeah.
We do a lot of presentations for today's meeting. I really didn't prepare a presentation, but we're used to going to Rotary Club and doing an hour-long thing on why inclusiveness, why accessibility. But I feel like this is more of a conversation with your commission, and there's what does Access Navigators do, but then we do have a particular little niche with the city of Portsmouth that just has evolved. And so I'll be as brief as I can and share all that with you. Our next big speaking gig coming up, we're speaking to the Northern New England chapter of the American Planners Association. So we love to talk to planners, we love to talk to city people. When we first started Access Navigators back in 2016, I thought that we would be working with agencies that serve people who live with disabilities. But in fact, we're kind of become the darling of the tourism industry and the economic development sorts of people, as well as DEI. All of this was unexpected. It's the way it's played out for us. So we work with municipal planners, public works staff, Department of Public Works, economic development departments, regional planning authorities, individual businesses, and we have conversations about pedestrian access, outdoor dining, special events, accessible parking, playgrounds, parks, attractions, all things like that. All of which seems to help to make your community more welcoming. So our overall thing with Access Navigators is that we look at restaurants and attractions in towns across New England, and we collect data on what we find so that a person who wants to go eat at a restaurant in downtown Durham and they want to know what to expect, they can look at the custom map that we've made of Durham and know how to plan. So it takes the worry out of what if I get there and I'm derailed, I can't get in the door, or it's all high top tables and so my dinner's going to be up at this level. So that's kind of the core of what we do. To do that, we're in about 25 towns across New England, including Durham. And the way that we have grown this looking at restaurants and attractions is that we mentor, for about 4 years, we mentored a group of undergraduate nursing students at UNH. There was a course called something like Community Health, and this was a bunch of nonprofits stepped up, and we were one of them. We would always get a team of 6 or 8 students. They'd work with us for a semester. We'd say, pick a town, pick your hometown, pick a town you'd like to go to, pick Keene because they have a pumpkin festival, pick whatever you want. And then they would do a deep dive and collect data for that town and input it into our maps. The nursing program, the professor left, that program kind of went away, and at the same time, an occupational therapy grad professor reached out, and now we do the same thing with OT grad students. So that's how the core of what we do across New England happens. It happens geographically because of the UNH students, and God bless, they're wonderful. They're great kids. They get 2 credits for doing it. They have fun doing it, and they kind of take it with them after graduation, that here's what our communities should do to be more welcoming, and businesses. But if I kind of take off that hat and move to what are we doing in Portsmouth, that's what I think is perhaps more interesting to you. Oh, and I should say, there is a Durham page on our website. There's a Durham map. We probably haven't updated it in a year. We're always looking for someone, I'll call the champion, someone who lives in a town that would say, hey, I'll keep an eye on my town and tell you when something changes. In Newburyport, the Commission on Disabilities has taken over their page on our website. We give them editor rights and they just do it, and they completely control their page. If there was someone in Durham, someone at City Hall, someone with a nonprofit, someone who just likes to dabble in computers, wants to take over your map, I would love that. Just get in touch, I'll teach you how to do it, and then you can control the Durham map. So there's that. So now let me set aside the restaurants and attractions. Once we got started in Portsmouth, we realized there were a lot of little things that you can do in your town to make your town more welcoming to people who live with disabilities. And over time, I think we kept waiting for this really big thing we could do, but over time we realized that what it is just a lot of really little things, but when you put them all together, it makes your town more welcoming. So at the beginning, we realized that a lot of the tactile warning strips at intersections, now that's that big mat that has dots on it. Some people think that's so they're not as slippery when there's ice on the road, but that's not true. It's for people with vision impairments. They can feel where the curb cut and the intersection is. And those mats get in bad shape. So one of the first things we did is we just started documenting where the broken mats were. And sometimes it's a really big hole that a crutch tip, a walker, like the foot of a walker, a heel of a shoe, they could get caught in the hole. And Portsmouth has this little app that the Public Works Department uses called Click and Fix. And you literally stand there with your phone, you take a picture of what you see, you're in the app, and you upload it. It GPSs to where you are, so Public Works knows who you are. And basically, I'd say, hey, it's me again. And I just found another broken tactile warning strip. And Public Works was thrilled because they can't keep an eye on every single curb cut in all of Portsmouth. So I'd go back a week or two later, and voila, there'd be a brand new tactile strip there. So it was like this easy little one-person crusade of making curb cuts and tactile warning strips safer for everyone in town. So that was like kind of one of the early tiny little things we did. Then we noticed there was a park where they had repurposed some old metal picnic tables that kind of had a seat attached to them. Almost, I sort of compare it to like we go to McDonald's and the seats are attached. When you have a picnic table and all the seats are attached, there's nowhere for the person who uses a wheelchair. They're stuck. You can't pull up to the table. And Portsmouth had a bunch of these in a warehouse. They put them out in a really nice waterfront park, but a person who uses a wheelchair couldn't sit at any of those tables. But I crawled underneath one and realized the seats were just bolted on. So I took some pictures and I sent them to Peter Rice, the head of our Public Works Department, and said, hey, I found this thing that isn't working well, but I also found a solution that doesn't cost you anything and would work perfectly. And that was my first kind of step into building a relationship with the Public Works Department. And Peter Rice and I talk all the time now. When he needs help with something that has to do with accessibility, he always just calls me and gets my opinion because he knows that I'm never going to attack him or attack the city or write some nasty thing on Facebook about this bad intersection I saw or this thoughtless table was put out. I just go straight to him with a picture and say, I saw this thing and I think you could fix it this way. And he's just always like, thank you, that's so great. So over time, we started both working with Public Works and also collecting a little group of people who use wheelchairs and learning better what their pain points are. So my partner here at JSA Architects is Todd Hansen. He uses a wheelchair and he speaks using an iPad. So he's kind of like the poster boy. If Todd can use a piece of sidewalk or a restaurant or an attraction, then we know we've gotten it right. Because if you can manage, if a person using a wheelchair can manage a space, that's sort of your toughest customer. And so then that means a person with a cane or a walker, or even just doesn't walk very cleanly, they'll be able to use the space too. So I kind of always use the wheelchair user as my sort of standard of excellence, but I really mean to include everyone on this. So we started asking our wheelchair users, what's keeping you away from things downtown? And what kept coming back to us was parking. And we said, well, parking where? And we kind of kept drilling it down. What are the things they would most like to do, and what are the reasons they're not leaving their house and not doing it? At the same time, we had a little kerfuffle last year with our Halloween parade. There was a 9-year-old boy who uses a wheelchair. He came to the parade and people stood in front of him and people would not move and let him see. And his mother was really upset and reached out to us. And I don't understand what kind of people would stand in front of a 9-year-old kid, but they did because it was Halloween. So we kind of spun that around. How do we manage parades? What could we do? And we found some towns that actually do manage parades for people with disabilities. And so we created a seated viewing area. We don't say it's for handicapped people. We don't say it's for disabled people. We just say it's a seated viewing area for anyone who has difficulty standing for any reason. If you sprain your ankle today and the parade's tomorrow, come sit in our seated viewing area. If you use a wheelchair, great, you come on down too. It's really for anyone, no questions asked. The first time that we did this was last year's Christmas parade, and our big surprise is that the city said, I bet you'll want some accessible parking spaces to go along with that, but there weren't any right there. And they made signage on a kind of a heavy pole, but it was movable, and they brought temporary signs in and created one-day temporary accessible parking spaces. And honestly, we were kind of blown away, because it never occurred to me that there would be the ability to have an accessible parking space for just a few hours or just for a day. But you can. And so that triggered this whole conversation about parking. Knowing it's the biggest pain point for people who use wheelchairs or people who have oxygen tanks or whatever it is that makes it hard for them to get where they're going, we realized that if we start to watch the events in town that people like to go to, and then ask Public Works to please bring those temporary signs in, we could accommodate more people that need extra help with their parking. And that's really what has happened. We bring the signage out for Market Square Day. We bring it out anytime there's going to be some big event downtown. We have giant lobster dinner downtown for 900 people. I forgot to ask for the signs for that event, but when I came downtown, they were already there. It's just in the playbook now at Public Works that if there's a special event, they create extra accessible parking. Then we came to the city and we were told the pain point was Prescott Park Arts Festival. There's no good parking there, but there is a parking lot that holds 16 cars, and 3 of those are accessible spaces. So we got bold and we asked the city, what if for the entire summer, every day at 5 o'clock, that entire lot turned into accessible parking, all 16 spaces. And I thought it was kind of a big ask, and they'd say, oh, fine, how about half of them? But they didn't. They said, okay. And they repainted the parking lot so that every space has an access aisle so that they can accommodate a wheelchair transfer. And it was wildly successful, and people came to the arts festival that had not come in years because they knew they had a really good chance of getting a good parking space right by the arts festival. So, like, we sort of keep looking for these little things that we can do like this. And I feel like each one of those feels like a really little thing. In 2020, when the restaurants were closed and everyone was doing takeout, we realized there was nowhere to eat your takeout in downtown Portsmouth. So we asked, could Public Works consider buying a couple of picnic tables to put in Market Square on the big wide sidewalks. And as soon as we made that ask, again, it's Peter Rice, sends me a picture. How about this one? And it's a round table with 3 round seats, and the fourth side is open, and that's for the wheelchair, or the baby stroller, or nothing at all. And he ordered 10 of them, and they're the most popular things in all of Market Square right now. Those tables are full of people. But the fact that Public Works always reaches out and says, will this work for you? What will your people think? Could you show this to Todd? Is this accessible enough? What do we need to do? I feel like the conversation has changed, that we're actually sort of thinking about inclusion at the beginning of these things and weaving it into the conversation. And we've put money into our CIP, the capital improvement budget. We helped Public Works come up with a memorandum of, a memorandum of pricing for a fully inclusive, universally designed playground for children across from our city hall. And so we did all the legwork for them, came up with the pricing, they put it in the CIP, and maybe it's 2 or 3 years out right now, but I mean, CIPs, things move around. When is it really going to happen? We'll find out. I don't know. But, you know, all of those things put together little by little make the town just feel more like you're welcome here. So I guess I could sort of open it up to all of you. What does Durham have? What are your events, or what do you think your tough spots are? Of where is it that you're looking for things that will be more inclusive for everyone? And like, where can we help you with that? Because we've gotten, I don't know, pretty good at this, of getting towns to sort of sit up straighter and pay attention to designing things for everyone. So I kind of open that up to all of you. What do you think? Usually I feel like when there's a room full of smart people like you, you're thinking, oh, you know, what if in Durham we did this thing? Or, you know, something's triggering an idea, and maybe if we collaborate, your idea and our experience of what we've done, that you can move an idea along the path.
And this is Janet Perkins. Thank you so much. That was just a lovely presentation. I feel like my heart rate is like 120. It was so exciting to hear that.
You're thinking of something, aren't you? I just know you are.
Well, actually, I was going to turn the question around a little bit because and ask, how do you get the information about what you need? Because I think, I work in healthcare, and I think we've realized pretty ironically late on that we have to go back to the people that are affected and ask them what they need first. So I love
That's how we ended up with all the parking. I just didn't realize how bad Prescott Park was for a person who has any mobility difficulties. It's so bad. You can't get there. The parking garages are too far away. Once you get there, it's really good, but it was the parking thing.
So that's a good example, and the fact that your co-founder is somebody with lived experience, I'm sure does not hurt that effort.
It helps a lot. He's an architect, and his specialty is healthcare.
Right. I remember I listened to him at Leadership Seacoast, and he gave a wonderful presentation.
Yes, you're right. I was with him.
But I'm just wondering how we as a town get the information we need to start working on some of these things.
I think finding out what your pain points are from people who are living with disabilities. So it's the how do you find those people? And I mean, what I've learned, I literally just sort of walk up to strangers on the street. I have a really nice, I could reach it with my headphones and I can't, but I have a really nice card that's sort of like a giant business card for Access Navigators. It looks really professional, so I always, kind of start out to say, I'm going to sound like a creep, so a stranger talking to you on the street. it's really easy to find a person with a disability, especially if you're looking for a person using a wheelchair. They're really easy to spot on the street. So you see a person using a wheelchair, I generally offer up my credentials and say, you're an expert in something that I need to know more about. And how are you experiencing the town right now? And honestly, that's how I've gotten some of, I call them my fact checkers. I have names for everyone. So my wheelchair users are my fact checkers. And every wheelchair user experiences the world differently. Every one of us experiences the world differently. I know back when Breaking New Ground's coffee shop in Market Square was open, I let Todd, my partner, I said, you're going there all the time, could you write up the assessment? And he writes it up, the counter is good, the bathrooms are good, everything's good. And so I write up this glowing report about Breaking New Grounds. And then I asked Roger Gallen, who's also one of our fact checkers, uses a wheelchair. And he started laughing. He said, Breaking New Grounds is terrible. He said, the cream and sugar is like way up here. And I'm gonna pour my hot coffee on myself when I use my cream and sugar. So I go back to Todd, I'm like, what the heck? And he goes, oh, I drink my coffee black.
Oh my gosh.
And to me, it was the best explanation of how we all experience things differently. So you do need you need a black coffee drinker and a cream and sugar coffee drinker to make sure that your coffee shop is actually accommodating everyone's needs. And so one of the reasons that all our mapping is on our website is because it changes constantly. And if we printed a brochure, it would be out of date before it even got here from the printer. It was what happened with Newburyport. They were in the midst of creating a booklet that gave assessments for all their restaurants and attractions. But every time they got ready to go to print, they realized half their book was out of date, and then they found us, and so now they just use our map page. Now, our map pages, Durham has their own URL, their own map page. And like what Newburyport does, they take the URL from the Newburyport map page and they paste it onto their city website, they paste it into their Chamber of Commerce website. They let that map page be the go-to of what to expect for accessibility in town. Because they can edit it anytime they want. And the editing, it's so fast and easy to do this. The restaurants and attractions, that part is super easy. The finding out those little tiny things that would make your town better, I feel like you just have to pay attention and find some users. Some people with disabilities who don't have a chip on their shoulder, who don't live in a negative space, and some people do, and I get it. I would probably be a miserable negative person if that was me. But if you can find a person who's willing to just always feed you input about things they see. Tell me when I told Roger Gallen we were looking at curb cuts for broken ones, he said, oh, hang on, you don't even have to walk around town. And he literally emailed me a list of all the bad curb cuts in Portsmouth because he's hit all of them. So yeah, I think it is finding even one or two people who have mobility impairments. And where do you find them? I honestly don't know. I think you accost them on the street. Might be students too.
I think we actually do have a population that we could speak with, and they live in Baghdad Wood, and some of them do come into town, and they can walk, roll, wheel themselves, or with an assistant get into town, and they might be a wonderful for us to talk.
I mean, one thing we created early on, one spring when everyone was talking about the weather has changed and it's time let's all get out and go for a walk, and we realized that some people go out and go for a roll.
Yes.
And we really studied, Portsmouth is full of kind of outdoor attractions, and so we pinpointed our top 10 attractions, the African Burying Ground, the tugboats, the Prescott Park, outdoor things, and then we checked all the sidewalks and curb cuts and found a route that connected all of them. And we just call it a wheel-friendly route around Portsmouth. So it's really good for baby strollers or skateboards, and also wheelchairs. It's good for anything that's wheel-friendly.
Sure.
And that got a lot of traction. The chamber gives that out of their kiosks. So, you know, if you've got a group that's, do you think are they within shooting distance of downtown? That
Yes.
you could
Yeah.
take a look at the route first.
Yeah.
Walk it yourself and try to envision. And it's usually the curb cut, sometimes it's the sidewalks. But how are you doing on this?
I find that I do that anyways. My father was a quadriplegic for essentially all of my life. So growing up,
Great insight,
and you know,
isn't it?
and this is, I'm starting back in the 50s, and you did not have the Disabilities Act. And there was a
No.
lot of thought that went into anything we thought we were going to do as a family, because you had to worry about the parking, every curb.
Everything.
Could you get through the door? Could you get into the theater? Could they, you know, all that. And a number of the people that live at Baghdad Wood are relatively active, so they might be interested in, you know, giving us their opinion. We could meet with them there or whatever. Yeah.
You know, Zoom is so fabulous for a lot of people with disabilities if they have access to a computer. I mean, Todd says it's a game changer for him.
Yes.
He attends way more meetings than he ever attended before.
Yes.
In 2020.
Yeah.
Because he can.
Right.
And we
right.
open the chat box. He speaks using an iPad. So we always tell people to open the chat box, and he's typing his comments in, and he said he feels. And when you see someone on Zoom, you don't really see their wheelchair either. So we all look the same on Zoom.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you could get a handful of people, get a little user group, and I just always kind of honestly bow down to anyone with a mobility impairment because they're so much smarter than me. And I always tell them, like, I don't know what I'm looking at. You are so much smarter than me. What do you see here? What's your biggest pain point? What's the hardest thing downtown? What do you avoid? You know, what could we make better for you? And they're not used to that. They're not used to being seen as the expert. They're used to being seen as less than. But I see them as more than because they help me so much. I don't see things, none of us that are able-bodied see things in quite the same way as a person with a mobility impairment. And I should say, we do a little bit with vision impairments and a little bit with hearing impairments, and we kind of don't, because we're architects at core, so we're always about buildings and environments, we don't do much with developmental disabilities, and that should be considered also. We're just not pros at it. So I don't want to ignore that population. I'm just not very smart as to what different things they need, but some people with developmental disabilities also have mobility impairments, and so you've got some doubling up of things happening there. And then there's people on the spectrum with all sorts of, I mean, you can go down quite a path.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask you about neurodiversity too.
There's so much, and it's hard to do it in all.
Yeah.
So I try to stay in my lane because I know I'm not that good at any neurodiversity, at intellectual disabilities. We're just not that good at it, but we're pretty darn good at mobility impairments and buildings and outdoor spaces. So that's my lane that I stay in.
I'd love
I
to.
get really smart at something else, great, I'll add it to the repertoire, but it's not happening quite yet. It might be something that you look forward though to add, you know, find that expert and add it to your group.
Go ahead.
I think we're getting feedback because I'm.
Oh, well,
I don't know how to do this.
You have to be on here.
No, I'm on the Zoom meeting is the problem because I can't hear in the
Okay.
room. So I zoomed in so I could hear, but now there's a horrible echo. So I'll tell you what. I don't know if I can. I'll leave the meeting.
No, that's fine. Go use that.
Okay, I'll leave the meeting while we're talking. I'll sign that in. Couple things. I think Baghdad Woods is an excellent idea, but I also think that we should reach out to the university or Oyster River High School, get some younger people because younger people are going to go to different things than the people at Baghdad Woods would be interested in. We also might want to reach out to see if their parents with kids because their needs may be different than an older person who has mobility issues. And then I'd
I would
also...
really look at playgrounds too. And playgrounds are sexy. Like, you can raise money for playgrounds. No one's going to vote against children with disabilities. So it's always kind of an easy, we're deep into it in Portsmouth. There's a lot of playgrounds here.
And then
Last week, we had a conversation, Tom and I, with the Institute on Disability at UNH. They're well aware of what we're doing. We're kind of collaborating back and forth on things. I would talk to them, and I can connect you with names if you need it.
Great.
I have a question if you're done, or have you?
well, you have a question for me, or you have a... Okay, I have something else to say. So
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would also encourage us not to only look at mobility, vested interest to look at hearing and vision issues, and to figure out, I think it's really important if we have a user group or advisors that they're kept abreast. So I'll share right here that I have complained multiple times about this room where the acoustics are terrible. I come to public meetings, people speak to the council, they stand at the podium, I'm sitting back in the chairs, I can't lip read from there, I can't hear. So either I have to zoom into a meeting while I'm in the meeting and then have the trouble I'm having now, or I have to creep along and stand behind who's ever sitting in Todd's chair so that I can watch the speaker. I've said it multiple times, and I've never gotten any kind of feedback saying, well, that's a great idea, we'll do it, or, you know, that's absolutely impossible, and this is why, I'm sorry. I've suggested that they move the horseshoe so it's facing there and move the podium even back a little so someone sitting over there could see the speaker's face. But it's like, you know, blowing in the wind. So if we ask people for their input, whether it's however we do it, whether by email or by user groups or forums or whatever, we have to make sure then to keep them abreast of where their comments and ideas are going so they feel like they're heard and taken seriously.
Well, I will just note on that topic, you know, we do have the assisted listening devices available. And in addition, we now have, as you'll see on the Zoom, the closed captioning.
Yes, which got turned on in the middle of Ann's speech. I wrote Craig, thanks for doing that.
And as part of the proposed budget for next year, we're planning to, I'm going to recommend moving forward with an update to our DCAT Castus backend system, which is recommended by Craig Stevens in DCAT, which will allow live streaming closed captioning. So that should help. Those are all things that should help. And not only that, but it would allow us to provide alternative language in real-time live streaming as well. We'll have to choose which language or languages. But
Great idea.
they're coming. It's coming.
So that's wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice if somebody had let me know that, because I have identified myself multiple times to Craig. And the listening devices don't work well for me. And it says on the website, you need to request them in advance. So there's sometimes there are meetings and I'm like, I don't think I'll be able to go to it, or I have something else, oh, that got canceled, I'll run down to town hall, but I haven't been here to request the thing in advance. So it all needs tweaking. And I'm sure I don't know Ann, if you've done things for hearing disabilities in Portsmouth, or how much control there is over businesses and restaurants, for example. But as a person with increasingly severe hearing problems, it's incredible. I don't do things I used to do, because you go into a restaurant or even a place of business, I want to go shopping, and the background music is so loud that I can't hear the person I'm with, and there's just no reason for it to be that loud.
For the first few years, every time that we would speak to a group, we would say, hey, we're really new, and who has ideas of what are you thinking, and what should we be looking at? And someone would always raise their hand and say, noisy restaurants. You know, my friend has a brain injury, my grandmother wears hearing aids, whatever it is, noisy restaurants. I want to have romantic conversation with my girlfriend, many reasons, noisy restaurants, it's a problem. So we started to try to figure it out. How do you take sound readings? How do you do that? And then how do you report that? And at some point, as we're trying to figure it out, I stumbled across this app called Soundprint. It works best on iPhones, but it also it's working better and better on Androids. It's developed by a gentleman in New York City. His name's Greg Scott, and he's deaf. And he's horribly impacted by noisy backgrounds. So he develops this app. And what you do, if I was giving a presentation, I would actually have screenshots of my phone doing what it does with Soundprint. When you walk into a restaurant, I turn on my phone to Soundprint, and it's a decibel meter. It collects the decibel reading for 15 seconds, and then it stops and it says, "Are you at Libby's in Durham?" And I say, "Yes, I am." And it drops the decibel reading onto a map. And the next 10 people that go to Libby's and do the same thing, it takes those decibel readings and it starts to average them out and drop them on the map. So that anyone who's visiting downtown Durham can pull up the Soundprint map for Durham and look for the quiet restaurants. So, maybe Clark's is really quiet and Libby's is really noisy. It'll show it on the Soundprint map. Now, I don't manage this at all. This is all from this Greg Scott in New York City. But every time I go out, it's like a grassroots effort. I whip out my phone and I let it run for 15 seconds. You don't have to tell anyone you're doing it. Just do it. And then you input it and it collects the data. And this is happening all over the United States. Every town in the United States, people are collecting sound data into this app. Todd and I were in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago for a speaking gig. We didn't want a noisy restaurant. I opened it up. It GPSed us and knew right where we were. And there was the map, and there were red pins on the map that meant noisy, and there were green pins that meant quiet. And we said, great, let's go to one of the quiet ones. And we went, and it was a super quiet restaurant. So we do often, it's on our website, the link to Soundprint, there's a website. He gets a lot of fabulous press. All the big newspapers have written articles about Soundprint. Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, he's in all of them. It's pretty cool, and it helps you. It doesn't help a noisy restaurant be quiet, it just helps you not spend your money there. Just don't go there. That's the best I can say. Don't vote with your wallet, go to the quiet restaurant. And I have found it to be a wonderful app and people love using it. So I collect data for Soundprint all the time. So that's the only solution I can say on noise is that there is an app that particularly when you travel and you're looking, it'll help you find a quiet place. It's not perfect. Maybe it's quiet all day and you go there at night when the music comes on, so nothing's perfect, but it's a cool little app to look for. Find it on our website.
Richard? Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question about lighting. I know that the traffic group here in Durham, there's a committee that oversees that, or at least individuals do. And I think that they're already discussing better lighting at crosswalks. But I wanted to throw that out because I noticed that the major crosswalks, or some of the major ones in town, are a little, shall we say, hard to see sometimes. And I just wonder if that's magnified for somebody in a wheelchair or for somebody who's physically disabled to navigate. And I see also a safety issue with cars. So I know at least once in the 26 years I've lived in Durham, I almost hit a cyclist at an unlit crossing because I wasn't expecting to see them, and it was dusk, and the lighting was bad, and I had a near accident. And I think there are a couple places around Durham where that can happen more easier than you think. And I also know this is an issue for elderly people as well, both driving and walking. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm writing it down so that I can steal your idea. The only thing we've dabbled on is how long is your crosswalk signal, because people with disabilities need a little longer, and sometimes we'll see one that just seems like it's moving too fast, and we'll ask if it can be adjusted. But to check on the lighting, and I don't know if you can actually measure that with lumens, or we're just sort of anecdotally saying, wow, this feels dark. Mm-hmm. But it's a total safety issue. I think that's, and not even for people with disabilities, that's just everywhere. We all want to have a well-lit crosswalk. So, yeah, thank you for the thought. I love to collect ideas from school people.
Anyone else?
I should say too that the most recent thing we did, I was on a committee that we've written ordinances to govern our outdoor dining, which was so popular in 2020 that a lot of it is still around. And so we were asked to kind of write the accessibility part of outdoor dining, and it has not been approved as an ordinance yet. It's going through legal right now, but we've asked for tables that accommodate a person using a wheelchair. So that means a fixed seat picnic table is not going to fly unless it has an extension off the end of it. And we've asked for dining that's in parking spaces be required to have a platform that's flush with the curb, so there's no step down. And some table spacing that accommodates a little better movement in between, not so squished together. I don't know, does Durham have much left of outdoor dining, or has that all gone away, or the 2020 stuff?
We've always had the ability for restaurants downtown to set up some tables and chairs outside. It's an outdoor cafe ordinance, and they continue to do that. And the chairs that they use are typically movable, and the tables are small.
So that's all, yeah, that's probably all fine.
Yeah.
We always find high-top tables, which you don't see much in outdoor dining.
Yeah,
High-top tables are the bane of your existence, too.
Yeah.
Chairs, then you're having your food up at eye level. So we ask for that, too. No high tops, tables that accommodate wheelchairs, spacing, flush curves. But again, the city says, hey, we're going to be putting this ordinance together, and the city council's going to be voting on it. What do we need to include? And I still marvel that we're part of the conversation. They're unwilling to write anything about accessibility without reaching out and making sure that we think it's okay. It's very flattering.
That's great.
Well, so Anne, if there's any, I don't know if there's any more questions or comments out in the crowd or around the table here. We're so grateful to get this input, and I don't know, I really appreciate learning through story, and you have so many great stories, and stories of process, stories of outcome, stories of relationship building that are really instructive, and so thank you so much. I have a feeling we'll be back in touch, and before you log off, can you just say your name? I just want to make sure I have the pronunciation right. Your last name?
Weidman.
Weidman, okay.
Ann Weidman.
All right, well, thank you.
And just stay in touch, shoot me questions. Like, we're so happy to collaborate with anybody on anything, and often if I don't have the answer, I can refer you to someone that does, or if it's I get a lot of questions on accessible restrooms, and sometimes I have the answer, or sometimes I go to one of the gurus in the office. I'm not actually an architect. We all work for JSA Design, architecture firm. We've done a bunch of buildings on the UNH campus, so we're in Durham, but I'm the community engagement person, so sometimes I talk like I'm an architect, but I'll actually venture into the office.
You just play one on Zoom.
I do. I play one on Zoom. I can say all the things, but then someone will ask a very specific question about a dimension in a bathroom or something. I'm like, hang on, let me go get it from one of the real architects.
Well,
So, we can answer a lot of questions and kind of accomplish, I just keep calling it these little big things, all these little things that users tell us together become really meaningful. So, start looking at all the little things.
yeah, well, thank you for your generosity and your time today. We really
Thanks for
appreciate
offering
it.
Zoom. This solved all my problems.
Yeah.
Half my office is sick. It's been a bad month.
'Tis the season.
Oh, gosh. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
all.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ann.